Kenya will host the Africa Climate Summit from tomorrow, with President William Ruto urging participants to use the opportunity presented to push for better climate financing.
The president, speaking as he closed the inaugural African Youth Climate Assembly, also asked the Global North to live up to its commitment on climate action. Brenda Wanga with the details.
The ride from State House to the Kenyatta International Convention Center by President William Ruto, perhaps an indicator of the seriousness with which the country and the continent regards the maiden African Climate Summit. In an electric car, the president made his way to the venue that has also, for the last 2 days, been host to the continent's youth for their climate assembly. The assembly, in its declarations, calling for, amongst other things, the inclusion of the youth in decision-making on matters to do with climate change, as well as better financing of the climate agenda on the continent.
Number 2 is for stakeholders to accelerate the establishment of a global green bank and ensure that the African youth, African children, as well as their interests, are well represented in the bank.
That question of climate financing also featuring prominently in subsequent discussions, with increased calls for fair access to funds from the international community to help Africa, which, although contributes less to the global warming, bears the inordinate burden of the vagaries of climate change.
And when we talk about financing, we're not talking just about loans, as my brother has said. And especially if we are getting loans 5 times more expensively than others.
We are shortchanged by climate change. Why are we going to be shortchanged again by paying more expensive loans to really develop our economies for what we did not create?
The summit, which begins on Monday, is expected to look into ways of helping African countries vulnerable to adverse effects of climate change cope with the same.
Must, as humanity, realize that climate change is not, for example, our making as Africa. It is not the making of ordinary citizens. We're here together, and we must make it much more easy for people to find safe haven when they are victims of climate change, whether it's drought, whether it is cyclones, whether it is what you're talking about, the flood, the mudslides in Rwanda.
At the same time, the president was firm on the need for the continent's carbon assets to be valued and compensated accurately and at the same level with global pricing standards. He also urged the continent's youth to explore opportunities in agriculture to combat climate change, create jobs and expand industries.
Agriculture and food production. That is a space where we not only have competitive advantage in Africa, but it is a space that we have great opportunity to create jobs, to create enterprise, and to create wealth.
But while the attention was largely on matters climate change, the president, who is set to welcome other heads of state for the summit on Monday, cautioned against the rise in military coups across the continent, urging for the respect of democracy.
We must not allow our continent to slide back into military dictatorships because we have failed to listen to the people.
The climate summit kicks off on Monday and will run for 3 days. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV, Nairobi.